Hello again, Year 9, and welcome back. Today we are going to be looking at the different methods used by women to try and gain suffrage. So I'd like you first of all to write the title, which is Persuasion or Violence, and then to have a go at the recall questions below. So what were conditions like in the trenches, which countries were in the Triple Entente, and what does the term suffrage mean? So pause here. Have a go at the questions and then come back. Okay, hopefully you've had a go at those questions. What we're going to do now is go through the answers, so you can mark these and tick them or correct them as you go through. So conditions in the trenches, you might have talked about it being dirty, smelly, muddy, particularly that mud leading to things like trench foot. You might have talked about the rats, you might have talked about the boredom, the fact that they were constantly on edge, particularly if they were near the front line. You might have talked about the fact that they were constantly having to check their weaponry, that some of them were on night watch, things like that. So there's lots of details that you could have talked about to do with conditions in the trenches. The countries in the Triple Entente were France, Britain and Russia. Remember, we know that the Entente has France in it because it sounds a bit French. And finally, the term suffrage. So a review from last time, the term suffrage means the right to vote. So make sure you've ticked those if you got them correct and changed them if you got them wrong. So for some people today, this is going to be a bit of a review and a reminder of the difference between the suffragists and the suffragettes, and for some of us this is new learning, so you need to pay close attention. So the first things we are going to look at are the difference between the words militant and moderate. So the two groups we're going to look at today, one of them is militant and one of them is moderate. So a militant group is someone or a group who is willing to use violent methods to get their message across. So the way I remember that is militant sounds a bit like military. So they use military ideas. And moderate is someone who will use verbal methods of persuasion to get their message across. And they're much more law-abiding. So if you make sure that you've got those two keywords jotted down, pause here and then come back to carry on. So your next task now is to use the information I've given you on the PDF document to complete the profiles for each of the groups. So you're going to complete one profile for suffragists and one for suffragettes. If I just show you that profile so that you have an idea of it, it is this one here. Yours will look like this when you open it. If you don't have a printer and you can't print this out, that's absolutely fine. Just make sure that you've got something similar, so you've got the name of each group, the full name, their leader, the date they were formed, the campaign methods, and how effective you think those methods are. So how good you think whatever methods it is that they use are at getting the right to vote. So that's what you're going to do. What I would then like you to do, please, is once you've completed that, you can come up with a way of remembering the difference between the two. So, for example, my method of remembering the difference is that I know that suffragettes were the violent ones because it has the word jet in it, and jets are in war, or they might be used in war. So that's the way I remember it. You can see if you can come up with a better way than me to remember it. So pause here, make sure you complete that task, and then come back for the next part. So we've discovered what the difference is between them. Hopefully you've understood that the suffragists are the moderate group, so they are law-abiding. They use things like sending letters or petitioning people in Parliament, or waiting nicely outside Parliament meetings, whereas the suffragettes are much more violent. So they do things like setting post boxes on fire and smashing windows, and they even bombed a politician's house. So they are considerably more militant. What we're going to do now is think about whether or not those militant tactics were the most effective method of campaigning. So we're going to do some evaluation. So firstly, we need to think about what our criteria is for an effective campaign. So what do we deem to be an effective campaign? So is this something that captures the attention of the people? Is it something that captures the attention of the government? Does it get people on their side? Or does it show how passionate they are about getting the idea? So if it's a really good campaign, what does a really good campaign look like? So pause here, jot down some ideas, and then come back ready for the next task. So now we're going to think about whether or not we agree with this statement. So how far were the militant tactics of the suffragettes the most effective method of campaigning? So if we're saying how far, that's asking us to give a measurement. Okay, so what I've done here is I've given you a table to help you with the vocabulary of how much you agree. It's asking how much do you think those militant tactics, so those violent tactics of the suffragettes, were the best method of campaigning. So if you think 100% I think that they were the best methods, then you totally agree, and you think that those methods were extremely important and they had a radical impact. Okay, if you think maybe I'm undecided, so they were quite important and they had a moderate impact on people's opinions. If you think that they maybe had a bit of an impact, you might say maybe 20% important, then you slightly agree, or you agree to some extent, and you think that they were minorly important or only somewhat important in the gaining of attention for the women's cause. So you might say they had a partial impact. You could even argue, if we're down here at 0 or 20%, that they had a negative impact on women's right to vote. Okay, so have a think about what you think and decide how much you agree with that statement. So you might like to jot down a couple of ideas about the kind of vocabulary that you might use. Now we're going to have a think about how we're going to write an answer to that question. So I've asked you how far were the militant tactics of the suffragettes the most effective method of campaigning, and I would like you to use the vocabulary here to write an answer to say how far you agree. Now remember that you need to back this up with evidence, so you need to support your answer with things that the militant suffragettes did, but you might also like to counter that with the things that the more moderate suffragists did. Okay, so once you've written your answer, I'm expecting it to probably be a decent chunky paragraph. You need to show evidence of your work to your teacher. So all of your work that you've done today, you can either take a picture of and upload, or you can upload if you've done it on a Word document to show my homework, or you can email it to your teacher. So that's either myself, Mr. Rome, or Mr. Porter. Good luck.